Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Webb Presents here on Amazon Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again. If you guys are new to us on the Amazon side, I see you guys already coming in there. Going to send you guys a welcome message. Welcome to you. Make sure you guys, if you are new, you do hit that follow button. You'll see it either here in this corner or down below. That will keep you updated on all of our programming we do here 6 days a week here on Amazon. Also, you will see some of the books by our next guest. We're excited to welcome author John Pavlovitz to our broadcast today. Had some great conversations with John in the past. He's celebrating a brand new book we have highlighted in the carousel here on Amazon. One I think you guys are going to really enjoy. It's called Worth Fighting For. Finding courage and compassion when cruelty is trending. We're going to talk to John not only about the new book, but what it's been like for him to see the early response to it and what he hopes you as readers and thinkers are able to take away from the book as well. We are simulcasting our broadcast today, so welcome to those tuning in on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and X. If you guys have any questions or comments for John, make sure you guys put those in the comment section. We'll be glad to be able to bring those up as well. But John, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Oh, so good to be with you again. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, the pleasure is definitely all mine. John, I really love this book, and I love the way, I mean, it's very obvious you're a teacher at heart, because I remember when I read, if God is love, don't be a jerk, and now reading A Worth Fighting For, the way you're able to bring the reader in and get us to reason is really a skill. So I want to ask you, what has it been like for you to use your gift with words to be able to have these very important but sometimes challenging conversations?
Well, thanks for saying that. This was all a surprise to me. Really, writing was only something that I did in the context of being a local church pastor and preparing for my messages for years. And so that's really my writing was only meant as a framework for the messages that I was giving, verbally. And when I had the opportunity to write on the blog and started reaching an audience, I really realized that I wanted to speak with clarity into issues that really mattered to me and that hopefully mattered to other people. And so it was really a slow process of developing a relationship with people who would be encountering my words, who may have had no frame of reference for who I was. And so trying to find a way to quickly and articulately craft what my mindset was to kind of get us on the same page. And so that's really what I've always tried to do, is reach people where they are and connect them to my humanity.
Yeah, love that. And I think too, not only your own humanity, John, but I think in Worth of Fighting For in particular, we're able to see that you allow us to know that just because people may be disenchanted with what they see in the world does not necessarily mean that they are really disenchanted with God and the message that Christ tried to share. And you even say in the book, Worth Fighting For, that, if you're looking at the world, yes, it can look like a mess. But the messages that Jesus shared have not changed and are definitely a big contrast to what we see. What has that point been like? Because, for a lot of people, and we've all heard the saying, I think, John, for a lot of people, our lives are the only, Bibles that people will open. And unfortunately, for some people, that may not be a good thing.
Yeah.
So what has that been like for you to show, to look past the person and look at the message?
I think the work that I've been doing as a pastor who began to have some tensions between the faith tradition I grew up in and what I was feeling called to, and in my case, in the teachings of Jesus, I saw this disconnect. And so I've always had a feeling that I was wrestling both with and for my faith tradition. And I think people respond to that. And so whether they are religious or not, they're looking out at the world and they're seeing the same causes for grief and the same, tensions that I'm seeing. And so they're just joining me in asking those questions and confronting all the inconsistencies. And I think that's healthy. And so I love that there's this spirit of, whether I'm a religious person or not, I can connect on these teachings that are based on seeing the inherent worth of a human being and seeing our interdependence. And so I'm always continually trying to lift that part of it up. It's not about converting anyone to a particular theology, but about having people with the same sort of like-hearted people, I call them. And so that's the work that I've been doing.
And I love the fact that, as I mentioned, I reference "If God is love, don't be a jerk," which was the last time you and I talked.
Right.
That there were some really powerful points there. I'm curious, what happened after the release of that book in the conversations that led you to where we are now with Worth Fighting For?
Well, Cyrus, traveling around the country has been a part of what I've been doing. And even during the pandemic, I've had the good fortune of being able to virtually still reach people where they are. And I consider myself not an author or pastor, but a collector of stories. I call myself a war correspondent because I get to
Mm,
step into the trenches of life with people all over the country and ask them to share with me what their experience is, and then I try to filter those stories and share them. And what I've found as I've traveled is just this is exhaustion that people are feeling because we've been through this state of elevated urgency, whether it's through our political situation or through just what's happened in the life of our country or the pandemic. So the book is really trying to give people a place of rest and encouragement to kind of refuel them for the work ahead so that they don't get so disheartened that they stop.
yeah. I want to go back to the title of the book, John. As I mentioned, it's worth fighting for, but the subtitle, Finding Courage and Compassion When Cruelty is Trending. And
Mm.
that has been one of the interesting things for me. I'm an optimist by nature. And I'm a person who is always looking for the good, and I realize that everyone's not going to have the best of days, and everyone's not going to agree on things, and that's perfectly fine. But the cruelty that you mentioned there, I think that
Mm.
is why there's so many people talking about the fatigue almost that you were discussing there. I think has become so dangerous. Talk to us
Yeah.
about what it was like for you to have this conversation with that in mind. That there are some people who, and sometimes I hear people and I think, are we living in the same place?
Yeah.
you know, because everything is so gloom and doom and not positive at all. But that is the message. What has that been like for you to address?
I think as someone who is a deep feeling human being and who cares deeply about not only those around me but those far away, I think there's a grieving that happens. There's these accumulated losses that we feel, whether we're watching something on the news or we're on social media, and it seems like every day, because of the influx of information, there's always something new to be concerned about or to grieve about. And so that's really more trauma than I think our systems are capable of handling. And that's really a part of the story here. It's about us realizing that all of those stories, they create a narrative in our heads. And the challenge is, how do I make sure that I have an accurate story? And so the way I describe it is to sort of right size the bad news, because it can be a challenge. Is this what's actually happening, or am I editorializing the information in front of me? So it's a little bit of both. It's staying informed about what's actually happening, but then stepping away and living a life that is full outside of what the news might be so that you can get an accurate picture of what's really happening.
I love that. As you were talking, John, I thought about something you wrote in the book about that very point. That it's not saying that there aren't things that are happening that are not good,
Mhm.
but it's our attitude toward that and what we choose to do. Because and I think it goes to what a lot of us, myself included, were taught as children. Either you're going to be a part of the solution or the problem.
Yes.
And it seems like for so many people, there's an interesting thing of, well, if this is what people feel, this is what people believe, I'm just going to go with that because that is what I'm seeing, or being able to look deeper. And that's why I think the title "Worth Fighting For" is so powerful, because it
Mm.
reminds us of, in life, especially a life of faith, it's not easy.
Right.
Life in itself is not easy, but it does not mean that it's not something that can be rewarding and satisfying. And you're a great example of that, John. And I know you don't like to think of it that way, but what has that been like for you just by shining your light to
Mm.
remind people of the importance of being a light in the face of darkness?
Well, thank you for that. I think ever since I was fortunate enough to get some sort of notoriety on national recognition where people were reading my words, it was simply about trying to share a reminders. I don't often really, I think, teach anyone anything. It's just I'm a reminder of things they may have forgotten. I think most of us realize if we step away from the fray and the activity, we know what we value and we have a certain posture toward the world. And it's about remembering who we are in the middle of all that. And so I've tried to just be a place where people can gather. The writing has become a hub for people who are saying, empathy still really matters to me, and doing the right thing. And even though I'm seeing all these conflicting bits of information, I always have two things. The heart of the book is you always have agency and proximity. You're always somewhere and you can always do something. And that's really where the hope is.
Does it for yourself? I thought about, as I mentioned, the last time we spoke was, if God is love, don't be a jerk. There was a great conversation you had with Maria Shriver about the book, John. And one of the things that was said in an interview that struck me that I remembered was the fact that a lot of this is the choice. A lot of it's the choice. We all make this choice of what kind of person we're going to be. And I will have to say, and you even bring it up in this book, Worth Fighting For, what we choose to associate with. How important has that been for you? I've been talking a lot about the importance of protecting our peace as well. How important has that been for you, especially in the work and with the profile that you have, to make sure you're doing that for yourself?
That it's a daily challenge, because you have to make sure that I think we have to do two things. I always talk to people about two wounds that we address: the wounds of the world and the wounds we sustain attending to those wounds. And so there's our activism, but then there's our self-care, and both of those are vitally important. And I think most people begin to focus on the wounds of the world and their outward and what they're thinking about, which is a beautiful thing, but they often do that to the detriment of their physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and relational health. And so it's really about balancing those two things, because the greatest resource that we have in showing the world more compassion is ourselves. And so we want to make sure that we're here for the long haul. I always tell people the goal is not you expiring early. It's you being here for a long time and being able to craft a life of sustainable compassion.
Such a great point. I want to say hello to you guys over on the Amazon side. Let me reset real quick for you guys who are just coming in. Welcome. Y'all are watching Cyrus Webb Presents. On the Amazon side, we are actually speaking with best-selling author John Pavlovitz today. You guys know him probably from a lot of his books, but the newest book is Worth Fighting For, Finding Courage and Compassion When Cruelty is Trending. We also want to say hello to you guys tuning in on the simulcast through Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and X as well. I see you guys over on the YouTube side. If you guys have any questions or comments for John, feel free to put those in. We'll be glad to be able to bring those up as well. Yeah. And that leads me to this point then, John. You have been able to give us the opening to have these conversations. And again, going back to the new book, it's not saying again that everything is right. It's not saying that we're going to agree with everything that everyone does. Mm-hmm. But this book to me is really about our approach to others, but also our approach to the world. Talk to us about the conversations that you've been having so far about that topic.
I think what I've realized as I've traveled and listened to people is that the divide is not the divide we think it is. It's in our country. It's not just Democrat versus Republican or Christian versus non-Christian. It's really a vision divide. It's a divide in how we see not only ourselves, but our neighbors and our resources. And so it's trying to help people understand that we are not in competition with one another. We are in collaboration, or at least we should be. And it's in having those conversations and trying to let the other person across from us know, in my case, let people know that regardless of their theology or their religious affiliation or their political affiliation, I'm for them. And I want all the same things that for my family, but I want them for them as well. And that's the spirit I'm trying to help people embrace, that we are not adversaries. We should be allies, because life is difficult enough. And so that's the great thing, to see those conversations start to happen individually with person to person and then collectively. And so that's, what more can you ask for?
Yeah, such a great thing. Did you go into the book Worth Fighting For, John, knowing, of course, when it was coming out?
Yeah.
and what would probably be happening in the world, especially in the United States, with it being an election year? What was that like for you to think about when it comes to especially the discourse that you want to see happen with this book, but also knowing the environment that it's being released in?
And that's a challenge, Cyrus, because there are kind of two things at play. I think compassionate people who really care about the world are always going to be in the tension between their convictions and their relationships. So sometimes they're going to try to preserve the relationship with someone across from them. And sometimes they have to really stand for what they really believe in, even if that creates turbulence between them and another person. And so I think that's been the dynamic that I know is there. And knowing that the election was coming, that regardless of what the outcome is politically, we're still going to have all these relational fractures and all of this, tribalism. So we really need to be preparing for not just a date on the calendar, but for a whole season of our lives. So it's trying to equip people for that kind of longer journey.
Yeah. You talk about, and I think, and one of the things I noticed when I was prepping for this with you, John, one of the comments that came up on Amazon, where people are already leaving their reviews. Definitely invite our audience. If you guys have already read the book, make sure you guys do share your thoughts there as well.
Yeah.
But they led with the thought of, can't we all just get along? That was such a powerful thing when it was initially said. It's almost become a joke to some people, though, it seems like these
Mm,
days, when they say it. But that does say a lot about what this book is about, right? There is a thing. When I was growing up, again, I was told that you can disagree with someone without being disagreeable. That there
mm.
was you could have that respect. That does not seem to be what most people are being being told these days, John. So what is your hope in that regard, that people will be? Because I think another thing that I took away from Worth Fighting For is the importance of listening,
Mm.
but also really being able to find a way to connect with people, even in spite of the differences. What was your hope, though, when people read Worth Fighting For, that they could then make personal?
Well, I say that the book, sometimes people need a hug around the neck and sometimes they need the kick in the behind. And I want the book to be both of those things. And I
Yeah.
think what I want people to do is realize that if you take people out of the boxes that we put them in because of their theology or their politics, and you look at a human being across from you, it's an effort to try and understand their story and the road that they've traveled to be where they are and to believe what they believe. We're all a product of those stories. So we want to try and respect those and really make sure we humanize the person across from us. Now, that doesn't mean we agree with everything they say, and we can fundamentally disagree and even oppose things that they're for or that they vote for. But it's really saying, I don't want to dehumanize someone, because that is what the worst of politics and religion do. And that's what fear does. So if we can take some of that out and really just see a human being across from us who is facing all the pressures and difficulties of life that we are, maybe we can meet at that place.
Love that. Hello to you, man. It's well good to be able to see you over on the Facebook side there. So I, for myself, I mentioned that I'm an optimistic person. You have talked to a lot of people around the world, John. You have done a lot of research. You do a lot of reading, studying, prayer. What keeps you optimistic today?
I think it's really about the fact that when you're out in the world today, I'm going to be heading out into our city and meeting with some amazing people doing beautiful work. And it's reminding myself that that's happening all over the country, all over the planet, and to really realize that that's the story I need to make sure I center, that I remember when I'm watching the news or on social media that there is this other thing happening. And that's what gives me hope. I mean, I get the beauty of meeting people like yourself, hanging out and talking. I travel around the country, and there's just a lot of great things happening, and it's not going to trend on social media. It's not going to be a headline, but it's those small exchanges that are really the story. And that's what we want to make sure we remember so that we can have hope as we go into the day.
John, you just hit on the last point I wanted to bring up, and that is going back to the subtitle of the book. And it's something that I try to tell people all the time, because I know a lot of people in my home state, or around my area, who do a lot of amazing things that people don't hear about.
Mm-hmm.
But we all have heard the saying, if it bleeds, it leads, and the controversy that our state makes the news for all the wrong reasons. It seems like the majority of
Yeah.
the time, when there's a lot of great things happening in my state. And to that point, that's another thing I thought about with your book, because, and that's why I want our audience to know, if you're reading Worth Fighting For, the thing is, the things you do may not make the national news. The
Mm-hmm.
difference that you're making in your area may not be something that everyone finds out about, but it's still making an impact. Is that one of the things you also want people to know, that no matter how small it may seem, John, that we can be able to make an impact where we are, and that is something that can spread?
That's right. Cyrus, remind people we live in stories and in systems. So the stories are these individual, beautiful, once in history, never to be repeated creations. And then the systems are these places where the stories exist. And it's hard to change the system, even though we do work on that. The story we always have access to. We always have people in front of us, and we can meet them where we are and simply share our humanity with them. And I think that's where the hope is. It's in the incremental ways that we perpetuate whatever we value and believe in, and we can do that. We don't have constraints on that, and so it's about really embracing that agency that we have.
Love that. Such a great conversation, John. So glad we had a chance to speak again. Again, everyone, best-selling author John Pavlovitz has been our guest. Worth Fighting For is the new book, Finding Courage and Compassion When Cruelty is Trending. You guys can get it right here on Amazon. You can get, of course, the paperback edition, or, of course, I'll be able to get the Kindle edition as well. So the hardcover or the paperback here. So definitely take advantage of that. If you guys are not joining us on the Amazon side, there is a link that will bring you guys over to Amazon that is with the broadcast that you guys are watching, so you can be able to come over and get the book for yourself. John, how can our audience stay connected with you?
Well, the good thing, Cyrus, is there's not a lot of John Pavlovitzes around. So if you can spell my name, you can find me on all social media, Substack, X, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. And you can follow me on johnpavlovitz.com. But I'd be grateful to connect with your viewers and listeners.
All right. Well, John, thank you again for taking out the time. We know you have a crazy busy schedule, but definitely looking forward to our next chat together.
Me as well. Thank you so much, my friend. Good to see you.
Okay, same here. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Cyrus Webb Presents here on Amazon Live. Until next time, I'm Cyrus Webb, and thank you so much for being with us. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.